Welcome back. In case you're joining us on Morning Express, well, it's time for us to deliberate and debate on the Building Bridges initiative. The question that we had asked earlier on is in regards to what the Deputy President has had as a press statement, and he said that it is not a priority for us to be looking at the Building Bridges initiative, particularly with the proposal that we should have the referendum in August. Do you agree with the Deputy President that the referendum is not a priority? Do you agree with the Deputy President that the referendum is not a priority? And we have quite a number of your comments coming through. I'm going to read them through as we go along with the show. And, well, yes, keep them coming. Do you agree with the Deputy President that it is not a priority? Now, the Deputy President, William Ruto, yesterday was igniting a new chapter in the Building Bridges initiative conversation. Ruto now wants the ongoing signature collection for the referendum drive stopped to allow room for consensus building in what he says will avoid dividing the country into a yes-no camp. At the same time, the Deputy President and his allies say they will only participate in the referendum held alongside 2022 general elections. Our senior political reporter Duncan Kaimba with that report.
Deputy President William Ruto's current residence played host to members of parliament and governors allied to Tanga Tanga team as they held a consultative meeting on the BBI referendum push. When they emerged, their resolution was a big no to the current Constitutional Amendment Bill 2020. Their reason being,
we have, as a team here, agreed that we will support the proposal by CIOC in Parliament to provide a mechanism in the referendum where Kenyans can vote on issues, not just a yes-no referendum.
The country's second-in-command insists there is room for a united approach that will ensure a non-contested plebiscite, putting him in direct odds with his boss, President Uhuru Kenyatta.
We have taken the position that there is room for us to improve this document further. And we have stated categorically and respectfully that it is never too late to do the right thing.
The team also wants the planned 2021 referendum shelved altogether.
Given the foregoing, it is legitimate to question the wisdom of spending 14 billion shillings a year before an election that will cost us another 42 billion going by the 2017 figures of the IEBC, when a referendum could be conducted as the 7th ballot in a general election at a virtually no cost.
So, where does the Deputy President stand in the event his quest for consensus fails? Will he support or go against referendum push?
You know me, normally I take positions and I'm very clear about. But you see, I am Deputy President today, and I have the interests of every Kenyan. There are people who support us, and they want a real choice to express themselves.
Suspense and anxiety remains as the DP remains non-committal on where he stands. Finally, Deputy President William Ruto breaks his silence as the signature collection gains momentum, of course stating his position categorically that with his supporters, they are rooting for the proposal by Ndaragwa Member of Parliament Jeremiah Kioni's bill that calls for a multiple referendum question, which basically says they are opposed to the current Constitution Amendment Bill 2020 as it is. How far will they go with their quest? Duncan Hemba, KTN News, Karen.
All right, and that's where we're at. And joining me now to have this discussion, we are joined by Honorable Senator Irungu Kang'ata, who is a majority whip in the Senate. Good morning, and thank you for joining us, sir, this morning. And let's start off from right where Duncan Kaimba has left us, and that's the question of our priorities. The Deputy President and those allied to him feel that the referendum, for one reason or the other, is being pushed in a hurry and is not necessarily a priority. Why do you feel that this is a priority for Kenya right now?
One, the need to ensure Parliament is gender compliant. That was a decision that was made by judiciary. It is an advisory that was rendered to the President by the Chief Justice.
But that is already in the Constitution. We really do not need a referendum for us to be compliant with the two-thirds gender bill.
You need, because when you look at Article 255 of the Constitution, you will see matters concerning Bill of Rights. They are protected. If for any reason Parliament or even Kenyans in their wisdom they decide either to do away with that principle or either to increase the size of Parliament so that they adhere to that principle, you may have to...
Okay, let's maybe approach it from a different angle.
Number two, allow me to set out the reasons.
Okay. All right.
The other most important reason why it is a priority is the whole idea of trying to protect some constituencies. When you look at Article 89 of the Constitution, it appears to suggest that some constituencies would be lost if we don't do something about it. And most of those constituencies are in the so-called arid and semi-arid regions. They are in Lamu, they are in Tana River, they are in Wajir, Mandera. Of course, even in Mount Kenya, we do have them, including Murang'a, that is Mathioya and Kangima, also in Nyeri, places like Othaya, because they have not achieved what we call constitutional population quota. So if we want to protect those constituencies, again, we may have to go for a referendum. And finally, we may have to go to a referendum if at all we also want to increase monies to the counties. Because if you don't increase monies to the counties, there'll be a problem. Senate this year passed third generation revenue sharing formula among counties. Imbued in that formula was the idea that you need to increase money, which currently is being devolved to the counties. So if for any reason we don't devolve money, more money to the counties, that formula will be rendered superfluous. And there'll be, in fact, a constitutional crisis, because on one hand, you have passed a formula that is hinged on an increased amounts of money that is being sent to the counties, but on the other hand, you have not actually devolved more money.
All right, and Senator, again, even to do with the revenue allocation to the counties, I put it to you that we actually do not need a referendum for us to have the 35%. The 15% currently is purely a minimum, and nothing stops, the legislature from moving it to 35%. That can still be done without a referendum. I know there is a question of it being a minimum as a 35, but there is actually no need for a referendum for us to get it to 35. It can still be done within the current constitution.
When you look at Article 255, it sets out matters which, if they were to be touched in the constitution, they require a referendum. And my understanding of that article is that anything touching on devolution, including that matter, it is something that needs to be taken to a referendum. Besides that, if you now leave it to the executive to increase more monies from 15% to 35% of the entire sums that are collected nationally by the government, again, you are depending on the faithfulness or whims of an individual. I think running a country requires laws. It doesn't require the goodness of a leader. And therefore, to firm up that principle, it makes sense for us to ensure that constitutionally, we have increased amounts of money that we send to the counties from 15% to 35% of national revenue.
All right, let's assume that indeed that is what is being planned and that's what's supposed to happen in terms of putting those issues into law, although I still believe they are already in law. But why the urgency? Why do we need the referendum now? We only have a very short time between now and the elections, and we have always had an issue, particularly with the IEBC. Shouldn't we be looking at ensuring that we have free, fair elections as opposed to having too many things happen happening between now and the elections, and we are likely to be ill-prepared come 2022.
Yes, I think we are about 2 years before we do an election. In fact, it's about 1 year and about 10 months. So meaning, for me, that's the more reason why we need a referendum now. So that if there will be any changes in the constitution in the area that touches matters elections, we are able to complete that process now as opposed to doing those changes later on. I take, for instance, there is this proposal to allow cabinet ministers to be drawn from the National Assembly. Assuming that is an important issue, again, it touches on what we call the functions of Parliament, because now Parliament will be fused with the executive. Again, that one is an issue that is also protected by the Constitution. You must take it to a referendum. And that issue is also somehow conjoined with our need for a free and fair election, or even matters politics. Why? Because Kenyans seems to suggest that the current cabinet, which is purely comprised of non-politicians, is somehow divorced from the daily struggles of the common Kenyan. And therefore, they would prefer a cabinet that has at least half of them being politicians. Again, also, in a situation where we want a cabinet that is duly representing the face of Kenya, so that Kenyans feel they are truly represented at that level, so that when we go to an election, people at least they are calm because they know they have a representation at the cabinet level. Again, that's an issue that is conjoined with elections, and therefore you need to clarify it earlier on as opposed to waiting after elections.
All right. Now, we've been told, and it has been mentioned, that this is a Kenyan document, the Building Bridges Initiative report that is supposed to be adopted and within the law go through a referendum. But there has also been amendments that have been made. We've even had the Deputy President and those allied to him say that they are happy with the progress that is being made to these amendments. Question is, how are these amendments being made? If it's a Kenyan document, at what point are Kenyans participating with those amendments, and who gives those amending it the authority to do that on our behalf?
That process of BBI was very consultative. I remember the BBI team that was chaired by my fellow senator from Garissa went around the entire country collecting views from Kenyans, and it published the first version. People raised issues. Again, it published the second version. People again sent various representation to the BBI Secretariat, though it took into account those views. Again, a bill was published. Several stakeholders raised several issues concerning that bill. Remember, there were concerns by the church. Remember, there were concerns even by the Deputy President when he was giving a speech at Bomas of Kenya. Remember, there was a lot of concerns from the civil society. Again, another revision was done. So meaning, in terms of consultation, I think this document has been very consultative. It has endeavored to take into account various representation by various stakeholders.
All right. What would you say to those proponents who are saying, and this is based on part of the press that was given by the Deputy President yesterday, and those who are allied to it, in considering the referendum as a seventh ballot, meaning that we are not necessarily going into a referendum, but it can be included into the election such that we save on the money, given, again, with COVID-19, Kenya really, and any country right now, needs every penny that it can save. Your thoughts on this, as having it as a seventh ballot?
Yeah, of course, I respect freedom of opinion, freedom of expression from those who give that idea. But now we cannot wait until election for that to happen. I've explained before that, one, we need to protect some constituencies. For example, where I come from, Madhya, Kangema needs to be protected. I know other constituencies in the entire republic that need to be protected. Failure to that, then we shall be going into elections with a highly skewed or reconfigured new units, and for me that will be very unfair to residents of those regions. Again, if we wait up to August 2022, the problem of gender top-up again will still be an issue. There will be a likelihood that we shall be going to that election. We elect a parliament that again will be declared by the courts as being in breach of the constitution. Remember, for instance, there's a proposal to, in express terms, set aside some position for women, so they need to be elected before. Otherwise, even if you are to vote in August 2022 for that, and you don't provide for their seats before then, you'll be saying then you shall be having a new election post-2022. So it doesn't make sense. We need to clarify all those issues before now, so that by the time we are going to 2022, all those things are in place. Remember, one of the key reasons why BBI came was the idea of trying to cure cyclic ethnic conflict in every presidential elections since 1991 up to 2017, except 2002. All those other elections had ethnic conflict during presidential elections. So we need to cure that. If you wait to up to 2022, you will be having a country that is already in some form of chaos. So come up with proposals, ensure those proposals take into account that problem, so that 2022 you don't have chaos.
All right, what would you say to those who feel that we are the priorities are wrong, in the sense that with COVID-19 we obviously have had a very, very harsh time. People are losing their jobs, but for the political class, they seem to be concentrating more on the building bridges, discussion, which is obviously going to cost us an arm and a leg, as opposed to maybe progressively having that discussion, but prioritizing, one, the economy, and ensuring that we get back on our feet. What would you say to them?
Yes, indeed. Currently, Kenya is undergoing very trying times. People have lost their lives. We also know of several situations where people have been rendered jobless because of the current economic situation. But on the other hand, again, take for instance the problem of the health sector. We know health is almost a fully devolved function. So meaning the entity that needs to remedy that problem is the county governments. And if you don't give them more money, they will have nothing to do. They can't really do good interventions. And BBI again is proposing to send that money. In fact, as soon as possible, if we could have the referendum, increase more money for our counties, then they will have that capability to address the problem of COVID-19. So in a way also referendum, the quest is somehow connected with our endeavor to fight the so-called COVID-19.
It certainly
problem.
is connected, but the question that I think many Kenyans are battling with is the question of priority. Do we necessarily need it right now? If we do not have food on our table, I think the priority would be to ensure that Kenyans can eat, Kenyans can have health care, which is a basic right, as opposed to looking at positions that will be filled, and maybe, assuming that your argument is correct, that it would solve our cyclic problem, but that's not a priority right now. That can still be solved over time. We can maybe lengthen it, as opposed to having it before the elections. We can still stagger it and have it during the elections and progressively improve as we go along.
I thought the problem of our health care is a priority, as you have correctly stated. But how else do you remedy that problem unless you devolve more monies to the counties? How else do you devolve more monies unless you do a referendum so that it's clear in law that you are increasing the shareable revenue from 15% to 35%? And therefore, for me, I think to me, it is a priority because it is geared towards devolving more funds to the counties. And once you devolve more money to the counties, you use that money now to address the problem of health care, which is devolved.
All right. And of course, we do know that the Deputy President and those allied to him have been pushing for a non-contested referendum. Do you see that happening given the occurrences of yesterday where they said, fine, there has been some progress and movement in terms of some of those amendments they had asked for, but we're not yet there. So it looks like we could be heading for a yes-no. Do you agree?
I do not want to speak on behalf of anyone. I would have preferred that each person to express himself, which is the best course of action. Of course, the impression I got from the statements that came out of Karen yesterday is that some people want to drift towards a no vote. But of course, it is freedom, and we shall wait and know actually what is their actual intention.
All right, and maybe to majority of Kenyans, or let me not say majority, to those who feel that this has been, sort of shoved down their throat, so to speak. We've seen a number of government machinery being used to, garner for the signatures. Is that really necessary? This is a political process, not necessarily one that should involve the state. What are your comments to that?
Yeah, of course, for me, I strongly believe that every Kenyan has the right to support the document or even to oppose the document. I also believe that in a way also the government has a stake towards the success of this referendum. Remember, there are some of the proposals are contained in that document that actually makes the state do its work in a more better manner. And therefore, in a way, it is a document that will definitely assist not only the government but also the wananchi. So to that extent, therefore, every effort by ordinary Kenyans or even government officials to support this document, for me, is positive. It's also part of the liberty that the government also has to propose various ideas, which include changing the constitution. So to that extent, I think we must also allow the government to come up with a policy, and if that policy is changing the constitution, that's why we elected it. Remember, the president is a symbol of the national unity. He is also conjoined to come up with ideas and support processes that ensure Kenya is a unified country. If BBI is that endeavor, so be it, and I strongly believe it is that endeavor.
All right, we'll soon come to your closing remarks, but in regards to IEBC, that has been a major bone of contention when it comes to elections in terms of having free, fair, and verifiable elections. Do you feel that the BBI is really going to resolve this, given that, according to the Kriegler report, we need to have the IEBC in place at least 2 years before we get to the elections? We're already fast running that way, and it looks like we're not going to concentrate on the IEBC before we even get to the elections, which is going to be going against the reports that we have received as to why we end up fighting as a country.
Yes, I think there were various proposals concerning IEBC in the first BBI constitutional amendment draft, but various stakeholders, including the Deputy President, raised concern on matters IEBC, the way it was originally drafted, and the government, the drafters of BBI amendment, the BBI Constitution Amendment Bill, took those views into account and recasted those provisions. And therefore, maybe what I would be urging various stakeholders is that please, we should not move around the goalposts. I think you give them an inch, they take a yard. You give them a yard, they take a mile. I think once you say this is what you want, once it's given, please don't shift. Otherwise, this discussion will be superfluous.
All right, and maybe as we wind up your closing remarks, Honorable Kang'ata, but as you also include in your closing remarks, what do you promise Kenyans is your expectation as the majority whip that we should get once we get this BBI rolling? What is it that you're expecting out of it? Is this the silver bullet we've been waiting for to resolve our election problems and our economy?
Yeah, various stakeholders proposed that they would want minimum guaranteed return to be somehow embedded in the Constitution. That principle was established when new proposed Article 11A of the Constitution was crafted in the new so-called BBI bill. Kenyans also said no. We want a judiciary that is independent. Let us not use the office, the proposed office of the ombudsman to whittle down that independence. Again, that was recasted. Again, people said we want a strong Senate. Again, more powers were granted to the Senate. That includes the power to vet commissioners of the Youth Commission, the powers to oversight all forms of funds, including counties' own source revenue. Again, also people say, no, we want constituencies to be spread out in the entire republic. Remember, under BBI, we have new constituencies in Coast, in Northeastern, in places like Mandera, in Nyanza, in Western, in Rift Valley. I'm happy. My county for the first time will be getting a brand new constituency after so many years of agitation, notwithstanding Murang'a County being one of the most populous counties. This is the first time we are getting a new constituency after so many years. So in short, the point is, I was in the forefront of fighting for Ward Development Fund because I realized governors are discriminating against certain wards. So I brought that idea before the Senate. It was passed. When it went to the National Assembly, it was killed. Now BBI has rescued that idea. Remember, when I was in the National Assembly, I brought an amendment to the Higher Education Loans Board to provide that jobless graduates should not be compelled to pay help. That idea was passed in the National Assembly. When it went to the executive, it was torpedoed. Now BBI is rescuing that idea. So the point is, there are a lot of gains under this so-called BBI bill.
But you expect that to help Kenyans? Okay.
Yeah, of course, to take like the issue of help.
All right.
I was very passionate for jobless graduates.
All right. Mheshimiwa, we'll have to wind up because of time, and thank you for joining us this morning just to unpack and give us a fuller understanding from where you're seated on the Building Bridges Initiative. So thank you very much. That's Honorable Senator Irungu Kang'ata, who's a majority whip in the Senate. Thank you for joining us this morning. All right, and for now, we're going to take a short break right here on Morning Express, but do stay with us. We continue. When we come back, we're going to be looking at drug and drug abuse. We do know that COVID-19 has certainly, given us very many challenges, and one of those challenges is an increase in drug abuse. So what does that mean? Where does that leave us? What are the solutions? We take a break. When we come back, that's a discussion. Do stay with us right here on Morning Express.